The INEOS Grenadier has landed on shores around the world. Marketed as a vehicle built on purpose and aimed at the off-road and overland enthusiast that is tired of modern technology and just wants an old-school off-road vehicle. I was just as excited as everybody else was about the Grenadier when I first laid eyes on it. But as the hype went up, so did the price. And there are also some serious concerns that I have about owning one of these vehicles and using it as it's intended. Let's dive into why I decided that this is not the vehicle for me, and perhaps why it may not be the vehicle for you. Hey guys, Tyler with Independence Overland. So I wanted to go over why I have decided not to buy the INEOS Grenadier. I had done some videos on that, and I'm sure that I convinced some of you to even buy the INEOS Grenadier, and I changed my mind on it, and I'm going to cover why I did that. I got some comments and messages from people who were disappointed that I decided not to buy the INEOS, and I wanted to share that with some of you and kind of go over my decision on why I decided not to buy the thing. So I saw the INEOS Grenadier for the first time at the Overland Expo Mountain West, and when I saw that thing, I just fell in love with the classic design of it. It is a beautiful, beautiful truck. And when I really looked at it and I got the chance to lay eyes on it, I decided right then that I wanted to put a deposit on one. And I did a whole video on that. I'll link that here. I was very impressed with it. As time went on, things changed and I decided not to buy one. I want to start this by saying that I'm not bashing on anybody who did buy one of these. I don't want to upset anybody that bought one of these or has a deposit on one of these. I'm not here to bash on the thing. I'm just explaining why I personally have decided not to go this route. There's not going to be many pros in this video. There's going to be mostly cons, and that's because I'm covering why I'm not buying it, and I don't want this to come off as a video where I'm just talking bad on the thing, because I do have respect for what INEOS has done and what they are building, and I'm very excited about what they're going to be building in the future. There's a few other variants of this thing that I'm more excited about personally, but let's just dive into why I decided not to buy this. Also, for those who follow the channel closely, I did decide to buy the Toyota Tacoma, the 2024 Trailhunter. I do know that these things really aren't in the same class of vehicle. The INEOS is an overbuilt vehicle. It's very similar to like a Land Cruiser 70 series, but I decided to go the route I went for specific reasons that are personal, and so we're going to cover some of that too. And so I'm not trying to say that the new Tacoma is in the same ballpark as the INEOS or anything like that. I'm not trying to say one's better than the other. I just want to get that out of the way because I know I'm going to see it in the comments. So anyway, let's dive into this. Okay, so price is obviously a huge thing on the INEOS Grenadier. So when I first saw this thing and I first started reading about it, and I did interviews on this thing at the Overland Expo, and what they were aiming for was a $65,000 entry. And really what I wasn't thinking about was that is the basic model. And you know, this is being advertised as the ultimate off-roader, as the thing we've all been waiting for. But that $65,000, even if they could have pulled that off, which I believe the entry level ended up being around 73, at that price point, you're not getting lockers and you're not getting a lot of the features that if you were gonna buy the ultimate off-roader, you're gonna want. Because with a Toyota or with a Jeep, you can just say, oh, I'm gonna add the lockers and stuff later. And of course you'll be able to do that with the INEOS, but I feel like it's gonna be a little bit different than it is with some of these easily accessible vehicles. But anyway, the INEOS Grenadier ended up being the version I had spec'd out was going to be, it was like $86,000 by the time it was all said and done, nearly $90,000 for this thing. And for me, and this is one of the personal things that I was talking about, I was absolutely going to cut the roof off of this thing. I was going to put an Alu cab conversion kit on this because here in Colorado, I want a space where I can get away from the elements. The seasons are short here, and in those cold months, I want a warm space that I can climb into and just get away from the cold or even the bugs or whatever the situation is. After everything's tallied up, I'd have a vehicle that is $80,000 to $90,000. I would want the front and rear lockers from the factory so I have a warranty, and we'll get more into the warranty stuff here in a minute. Plus the rooftop tent or the Alu cab conversion, which I'm sure is going to be between $10,000 and $20,000. So you're cutting up this expensive vehicle, putting this roof on it, and I'm sure my insurance company would not be happy with me on doing that. And so we're talking $100,000 for a vehicle that is not going to have much living space on the inside, and that is something else that I want to get into. After looking at the interior space of the INEOS Grenadier, really it's not that much different than my FJ. I was really trying to get my eyes on how much space would be in the back of it if I cut the roof off, and so I drew that on the floor. And I really gave it some time and looked at it, and I decided it just wasn't going to be enough. And there's other complications with that as far as the way I would even build out a space like that, because we have the FJ built out in a specific manner. We want the dog to be able to look out the windshield whenever we're driving down the road. The layout wouldn't really allow that. It'd be very difficult to pull that off to where we have functional living space plus a place for the pup whenever we're doing these long trips. The INEOS really, after looking at the space and looking at the FJ and imagining if I cut the roof off of this, how much space would I gain? And it really isn't that much. So anyway, that's part of my decision on why I'm not buying that thing. So the thing with buying the INEOS Grenadier, again, I would like to buy the version that has the lockers, that has all of the stuff from the factory. I can just go out and use this thing. And part of that would be the benefit is having a factory warranty. And now we will get into repair information on the INEOS Grenadier, because that has proven to be a problem, not just here, but in other countries. Okay, so when it comes to repairs, the thing is what attracted me to the INEOS Grenadier was that this vehicle was going to be a DIY repair system. It's going to be built in a way where you can fix it on the side of the road. And even if you're in a place where there's no dealer network or you don't have mechanics that know how to fix these things, all of that information would be supplied. And there's all these repair manuals that are going to be coming out on how to do everything on your own. That has not happened. And I'm not just talking about the United States, because these have not been here that long. This is happening in Australia and worldwide. I've read on the forums, I've read on or seen on videos. People are very upset that you cannot get this information yet. Now, I will give this thing credit where it's not breaking down and the people aren't having problems with it. The fact that this is one of the biggest things that INEOS promised and it does not exist yet is a huge problem to me. I don't understand what's happening. Are they going to wait until a bunch of these things start to break down to where, you know, who knows what it's going to be? Maybe it's a coolant line or something. When that starts breaking, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we should probably get this repair manual out. I understand that they're a small company. I understand that they're just getting off the ground. But this is important stuff. If you're promising this, these vehicles have been out in other countries for over a year now. You can't just not release this information. This is one of the biggest parts of the vehicle and one of the biggest promises that INEOS made to their customers, and it doesn't exist yet. For me, that's a big problem. I work on heavy duty vehicles for a living, and we have to use manuals for stuff like that because it's not always accessible to just send it down to the next mountain town and get it fixed. So we have to figure out how to fix things. And I probably would know how to fix some of these things, but for most people, or if it was something more serious and I can't get it down to the nearest dealer, which is probably gonna be over 100 miles away, how do I fix this thing? I think that's a problem. And not to mention that INEOS is notoriously bad. And don't just take it from me, go ahead and do a Google search on INEOS Grenadier customer service, and you will find that it is absolutely horrible. You email them, you'll not hear back. People try to order these vehicles. There's no information coming out on them. It's just a big problem. When I see things like that, I just have to turn away from it because it's just, that's scary to me. I know a billionaire owns this company, and so I'd even kind of talked myself into nothing bad could happen to the INEOS brand. But at the end of the day, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, he doesn't live here in the United States. He lives somewhere else. He's going to drive an INEOS because he put tons of money into this. But if it doesn't sell well enough in the United States, or it doesn't work out for some reason, and it could happen, just because this is a somewhat popular brand right now, it doesn't necessarily mean everything's going to make sense for them in the future. They might pull out of here in 3 or 4 years. Everything's just too difficult to meet EPA standards and crash test certifications and all that. They might pull out, and then you want to talk about getting hard to find parts and things like that. So I know I'm doing a lot of speculating, but I do have concerns that this will go the way of like the DeLorean or something like that. So that was one of the reasons that I talked myself out of it. Repair manuals were promised to everybody who bought one of these. Those have not been supplied. I mean, at least the early customers in the other countries, they should have those by now. But from what I understand, that has not happened. That makes me wonder, like, are you going to have to go to the Grenadier dealership for all of this stuff? Because like for me, it's all the way down in Denver, and that's probably, I don't know, it's a 3-hour drive. I'm not going down there for every little thing, every little problem that I potentially have. It kind of scares me off. If you live in those areas and you have the money and this is no sweat for you, I applaud you. I do hope the INEOS Grenadier is successful and we see it for years to come. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but from what I understand, there's only going to be about 5,000 or so of these shipped to the United States a year. So with that, I would argue that it's going to take quite a while before These vehicles even catch up to how many 70 series Land Cruisers are in the country that have been imported because they're 25 years old or older. And those things, I've looked into buying those a million times. And part of the thing that scares me away from those is like what happens if you get like a rock chip or you crack a windshield on a trip or shatter. Like, I mean, I've had birds and stuff hit the windshield before and it just shatters it out. I can go anywhere with a Toyota and I can get that windshield repaired. Where do you go with an INEOS? Because I'm not sure that everybody's going to be stocking those. Sure, there's going to be some of them around, but how many places are actually stocking those? Maybe the dealerships are. So glass aside, you're not going to be able to just stop at Napa and get parts for this thing. Some of it was supposed to be, somewhat universal parts and things like that. But being that Magna was building some of the axles or building the axles and the differentials and stuff, which are good quality stuff from what I understand. We're not that familiar with it here in the United States. But if you need parts for that, it's not common like a Dana is or like a Toyota axle is. And so that's another thing where for me, I was just like, you know what, it just kind of freaked me out. For the guys that are going out and just using this for simple weekends, that's one thing. Me personally, I want to go down to Mexico with my new vehicle. I plan on going to Alaska with my new vehicle and all around the United States and who knows where else. For me, it's just not there yet. And it's going to take a while based off of how INEOS is progressing and they haven't provided this information to all of their customers. To me, if I wanted to try to get this information when I'm down in Mexico or something, it might be 4 or 5 years at this point. They are notoriously bad with customer service. So don't take my word for it. Look it up. I promise you that nobody is happy with this. Even though I'm not going to be a customer anymore, I hope INEOS sees this and they really put it into high gear for the people that have bought these, because people are spending a ton of money on these and they're expecting this to last them 10 to 15 years. I mean, get with the program, guys. So the next thing I want to touch on in regards to not wanting one of the INEOS Grenadiers is the suspension. Once people saw these up close and they got the opportunity to crawl underneath them and look at them at the shows, what they were finding is that these things suspensions, while they are durable and they're very heavy duty, they look like they're way overbuilt. They're not really designed to flex. This is an overlander and not an off-roader. So the whole deal with the suspension is it's not really designed for articulation. So you're getting that solid axle, but you're really not getting that much articulation. And from what I have read online, there's really not that much more room for improvement because of the way everything is built in and it's so tight. So it's not the 80 series and it's not a Jeep. It is a very different thing. And obviously I haven't had a chance to work on one, so I'm taking people's word for this. If I was gonna buy a solid axle vehicle, especially for this price point, for me, I would want to have the advantages of something like a Jeep. Like my dream vehicle is a 70 series Land Cruiser, a newer one, and I know they don't flex very much, but it's a little bit different because it's a reputable brand, something that's been made forever. And so I would be willing to make that sacrifice on what's going on there. Even though it doesn't have that much flex, I'm sure it can flex as much as my FJ does and can probably go everywhere that thing can. But for the price point, if I was gonna do a solid axle like that, honestly, I would want to do like a Jeep 392 because again, I would have access to repairs, even though it's not going to be as durable, maybe not as reliable, we don't know yet, but at least I would have something that I have access to repair and it's got more articulation. I don't know, that's just me. Or if it was a 70 series Land Cruiser, then I would definitely go that route. Okay, so the suspension, that was a short one, but I wanted to touch on the size. Okay, so on the size of the Grenadier, and this is another personal thing. I wish this vehicle was the size of the Defender 110. And the reason for that is, again, because I wanted to build out an interior space. And if this thing was the size of a 110, I would have a very hard time not buying it because I do like the idea of having a camping space with access to the front seats to where you can just jump in if something happened. Who knows what it is, if it's a person, if it's a bear, if you have some sort of an issue at camp, being able to just jump straight in the driver's seat, not even shut things down, close things up if you don't need to, and just dart out of camp. I do love that, but the vehicle is just too small. I think for the platform and what I wanted to do with it, cutting the roof off, I just think that it's not going to be big enough for what I want it to be, and especially for the price. I feel that with a truck, I can do something that has a little bit more living space and more space overall in the vehicle, and I can do it for cheaper. And again, it's not going to be as heavy duty of a vehicle, but I think it's going to do just fine with what I'm asking of it. So for the price between $80,000 and $90,000, cutting the roof off of something and not having that much space for me was just a big one, because I measured it out, and in the rear, with the seats down, I believe is around 5 foot by 5 foot is the space you get. But the thing is with the plastics in the back, it does kind of disrupt that space quite a bit, because the rear plastics in the interior do have some weird round shapes, and it's not as utilitarian as something like the Troop Carrier or something like the old Land Rovers. I wish they would have done something like that, or at least created an option. And I do know in other countries you can get a stripped down version of this. In the United States you cannot. And so for me, that was a drawback, and I wasn't willing to spend that much money for that little of space, just because it just doesn't fit how I want to travel. So it's as simple as that. So with the interior, and a lot of you guys are like, why don't you just do another rooftop tent? I've done the rooftop tent thing. I love my Alu-Cab. If I was going to do a rooftop tent, it is going to be the Alu-Cab. It's just, I trust it, and I've slept in all sorts of crazy stuff in it. I love that tent. But I don't want to do another tent. I've done that for several years. I am getting older, and I would like to have a space where I can climb into something warm. I'm keeping my FJ Cruiser, and to have a vehicle with another rooftop tent, it would just feel like a very similar vehicle. I would like to do something different, and a truck to me just feels different. So the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? I would like to do just a completely different project. Okay, so let's get into the weight. This is a 6,000 pound vehicle, so it is heavy. I believe the FJ Cruiser is 4,200 pounds, so the INEOS Grenadier is 1,800 pounds more. It has thicker body panels, it has thicker axles, it has thicker everything. I mean, they are built like a commercial vehicle, which is cool, but they are super heavy. And then they have a payload of somewhere, it ended up going down quite a bit, which honestly, when I was making these decisions, I saw that the payload was supposed to be around 1,900, and it went down to, if I'm remembering correctly, around 1,500 or 1,600. And that did disappoint me, but I have to say that some of the stickers that I've seen, and I believe, I don't remember exactly the username, it's like Picard Overland or something like that. They hang out with Goose Gear. They had posted that the sticker on the door said a certain weight and their payload was a certain number. Anyway, the vehicle actually weighed less than was shown on the door card. So their payload ended up being like 1,800 or 1,900 pounds. So it did end up being accurate, but in my decision to cancel my order was because I saw that the payload was going down. I just assumed it was some sort of US testing or something that had something to do with that. So I have to give INEOS credit where credit is due, and they do have a relatively low published payload, but when you actually look at the door stickers, it looks like people are actually having more weight to work with than what was published. So anyway, I've only seen that one example, but I hope that's the case, because with a vehicle like that, I would certainly expect that it can handle a lot of weight. So next we're going to talk about the interior. Okay, so let's talk about the interior for a minute. So this is another thing. At first, when I saw the heads-up display that's mounted in the center of the vehicle, and for those of you that don't know, there is no speedometer. It's just a blank panel. And I'm actually used to that because I work on Mack trucks, and that little display gauge is actually very similar to that. But the more I thought about it, the more I was just like, you know what? I do not like this, because when you're talking about and this is just, again, this is just probably another personal thing, but when you're talking about screens, a lot of people with the modern vehicles, they don't trust it. They're like, I want analog gauges. And I honestly am part of that, even though my new Tacoma is not going to have that. So with the INEOS, everything is on one screen. As with the newer Toyotas, even though they're still digital, it's divided in between two screens. And I don't know the ins and outs of that, but it makes me feel like there's a little bit of redundancy. And having everything in the INEOS Grenadier all relying on one infotainment center kind of freaks me out, because if you lose that, then you lose access to all of your information. And I don't know that I'm totally in love with that. And I don't know the ins and outs. Maybe it's more of a reliable system. That's just something that the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? I really don't like this. I do wish they would have done something like a heads-up display, even on the windshield, to where you could at least see the speedometer, because when you're driving, we are all so used to looking down, seeing the speed, and looking up. It just doesn't feel like I would enjoy that in the long haul. And I know that people say that when you actually off-road the thing, it's awesome. But for me, we'll do 16-hour drives to go to another state somewhere and go do our thing. And so I'm sure it's great when you get off road, but you got to be on road for a very long distance before you get there. So I couldn't convince myself that that was going to be a great thing. I could have lived with it if some of these other issues weren't in the way. If I just fell in love with this vehicle, I'm sure I could learn to deal with it, but it was one of those things. So the floor bulge is the next one on the interior. I'm sure you've read about this if you've looked into the Grenadier. So it has the floor bulge, and luckily in the United States, it's on the passenger side and not on the driver's side. And there have been other videos where they've talked about how this is a huge advantage for America and all of the left-hand side drive vehicles where you're not going to have to deal with that. Well, the problem is your passenger still has to deal with that. And no, you're not having to deal with the pedals and everything, but I still feel like that's a problem. The thing with the floor bulge that I still have an issue with is when we were driving the FJ, Natalia, my wife, often puts her purse or one of her bags in the floorboard or even her camera bag. And when I have to sit there with both of my feet next to each other for 4 hours at a time, man, it wrecks me when I get out of that car or truck. And so just having that built into the vehicle, I was just like, you know what, no way. Just because it's not on the driver's side, again, she and I travel together a lot and it would just not be an enjoyable experience. That was another reason that seemed small, but it might have been a big problem, especially for people that do these long drives to go and then off-road somewhere. So the last interior thing I want to mention is the electronics being on the inside. Now, part of me says that this is a good idea because it's easy to access and all this stuff. So for those of you that don't know, the batteries, the relays, the fuses, they're all under where the rear seats are. And in a way that's good because it'll keep them out of dust and it makes it easier to access until you modify the thing. So for my personal use, if I was going to do something like an alu cap conversion, your refrigerator is probably going to go where one of the rear seats was, for instance, because then you can access it from one of the side doors. You can open that door, have your fridge out, have the back open, be able to get into your bench seats and stuff like that. It sounds cool, but when you blow a fuse, are you gonna have to take your fridge out and put that on the ground and then pull your fridge slider out, put that on the ground? If you have any sort of cabinetry or anything built into this thing, how much are you gonna have to remove to get to this? Because even if you build it specifically for that, you're gonna run into problems. You wouldn't wanna have to pull out all of that stuff just to get to something simple. If a fuse starts burning up, and we'll talk about that here in a minute because people have had that happen, you want to be able to get to that. And if you're going to do a full build out and you have a roof conversion, having all of your electronics there is a problem. So if you're just doing a simple rooftop tent and a basic interior build out, maybe this isn't as big of an issue for you as it would be for me. Again, if it was a Defender 110 size, I think I could make it work rather easily, but with the size of the Grenadier, I just can't make it happen. So I'd recently talked about how many of these were going to be brought into the country. So let's dive more into that because this thing is going to have limited aftermarket. Okay, so this is the most impressive vehicle that we've seen in a while in regards to how heavy duty it is. It does remind a lot of people of the old Defenders and some people of the old Land Cruiser 80 series. So these things are built like tanks, and that's great. But even though we're seeing right now a lot of products being manufactured for the INEOS Grenadier, I don't know that that is a fad or if that is going to be something that's continued on. Because if you look at the 80 series stuff that pops up now, it's such an old vehicle and there's such limited numbers of people modifying those anymore that it's not a big market. And so some of these companies that are building things for the INEOS, they have a worldwide platform that they can sell on. So that kind of helps, but still it's not going to be selling the numbers of things. So it makes me wonder if in the future, some of these companies aren't going to look at this and when they're looking to cut costs for their business, which happens for every business, if they're not going to look at, this vehicle selling 10,000 units a year, this vehicle selling 5,000 units a year, which one are we going to cut? We're not selling as much of the INEOS Grenadier stuff. I know there's a lot of companies that have good intentions for this thing, and I hope that they can survive, and I hope that they are making products for other vehicles to where the INEOS Grenadier is a passion project, and I know that is the case because GP Factor, Alucab, they're all working on really cool stuff for these, and maybe I'm totally off on this, but it seems to me that when the time comes that companies need to save money, they always axe the stuff that isn't a big seller, and the INEOS Grenadier is going to be one of those. And so while you're going to see aftermarket support for them, of course you're going to see aftermarket support for them, I don't feel like you're going to get as many options. I don't know that every single company that makes bumpers is going to jump on board as they do when the Ford Ranger comes out, stuff like that, things that are big sellers. So anyway, that's just my perspective on the aftermarket support. I don't know. Again, maybe I'm totally wrong. If you're a manufacturer, please chime in, because this is my opinion. I obviously don't know everything. Maybe some of you guys are just so stoked about this thing, you're going to support it no matter what. But I feel like maybe that will wear off after a certain amount of time. So aftermarket stuff aside, let's move on to the power plant on this thing. Okay, so the BMW B58 V6 Turbo. Now, I have to applaud the INEOS Grenadier community. I've been on the forums and stuff. There's a few articles where people are complaining about this thing because in the United States, we only get the gasoline turbo version. In other countries, they get the diesel option. But I have to applaud you guys because I've not seen as much bitching about the turbo as I have seen on the new Toyota stuff. The new Toyota stuff, it is the end of the world that we're getting a turbocharger. So the B58 engine from BMW is an inline-six turbocharged engine. And yes, this has been used in a Toyota. I even was stoked to hear that because I was like, you know what, this is used in the Supra, this is going to be great. I know it's a decent amount of power, the right amount of power for this vehicle, but it's still a BMW engine. This was an engine that was designed for luxury cars, and I'm just not totally sold that this is going to be the super long-lasting engine that we want it to be. This is one of those things that we're not going to know for several years. This was just another reason that I wasn't willing to take the risk, because as time went on and I saw things at Australia and people were like, where is the customer support we're waiting for? Where is the information we're waiting for? And that didn't pop up. Having an engine from BMW, who is not known to produce a reliable vehicle, they're known to produce very nice vehicles, but not necessarily reliable. I just can't afford to do that. If there's a problem with it and there's nobody to fix it, and you know, I don't want to have to dive into an engine rebuild or something like that early on. Some of you out there are probably going to need to think about some of the same stuff, because you might even watch this video 2 or 3 years down the road and you need to check on some of this information and see if any of this stuff has changed, because if it hasn't, we got an even bigger problem. But anyway, I just want to touch on the B58 engine because it has been proven, it has been used quite a bit, but at the same time, it's going into a brand new vehicle that it's never been inside of before. So who knows what alterations they made to make this thing work in their platform. Okay, so let's dive into the next topic. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some things that I have learned since canceling my deposit and getting a refund on that. And it made me feel better about canceling this thing, because don't get me wrong, I do get FOMO. I've seen one in town. There's a black INEOS Grenadier here in town. I see it around the coffee shops on the weekends and stuff. Absolutely beautiful truck. But this makes me feel better that I didn't get one, because when I see it, I'm like, man, that thing's nice. I could have a vehicle right now versus waiting on Toyota. But here's the thing. There is an Australian, and I forget his channel. I will link this video in the description box below, because I highly advise you listen to this guy, because he owns an INEOS Grenadier. And he will also back up what I'm saying about there's no information on how to repair these things yet, but there's more to it than just that. This Australian owner reported losing a key in the Outback. He went to get a replacement key for the mechanical setup that these things are kind of advertised to have. We'll get into that. I'll touch on that more in a minute. And he had to pay over 1,000 Australian dollars for the replacement. So while I've never heard INEOS straight out come and say like, hey, this is an all mechanical key system, it is advertised and kind of promoted as this old school off-roader. And so that will kind of lean you into thinking that it has these old school mechanical mechanisms. And with that, like even if you watch a TFL video, they're like, hey, here's the key. We have an old mechanical key to slide in this thing and start this thing up. Well, it still has all the microchips and stuff in it. This Australian man had to go and spend $1,000 on the key because he lost his out in the middle of nowhere when he was camping. And when he went to go get another one, he's like, oh, this is going to be cheap. He got there. It was not cheap because it has so many microchips inside of it. It was going to be $1,000. I'm not trying to say that INEOS is lying to anybody or anything like that, but I am saying there's little things like that that you won't know until somebody like this guy owns it and finds out and goes to get this key done, and he thinks it's just this basic key, because why did they not just do a push button start? Because honestly, at the end of the day, those are just microchips and stuff. It's a simplified ignition system, but really it's not that simplified of an ignition system. It's still an advanced thing in a very expensive vehicle that's hooked up to a BMW engine. So I'm sure you can see where I'm going with that. And in the same note, I do recommend you guys watch this guy's video. It was very informative. I just watched this a couple weeks ago, actually. He had to get a steel wheel from INEOS replaced, or he wanted another one, I think maybe for his spare. He said the wheel was like $1,000, or maybe it was 800 Australian dollars. Either way, it was very expensive. Steel wheels are supposed to be the cheapest wheel on the market. It was incredibly expensive. And then he had a problem, I believe, as well with like the weather sealing around the door falling off. And I do believe that would be an easy fix. So that's not as big of a deal, but it's one of those things. And he did run into issues on getting stuff, having repair manuals and stuff like that. I'll link that. He can tell you better than I can. But if you're watching this, sir, thank you for putting that video out. I think people need to see that kind of stuff, and I hope you put out more. And I just need to note, the guy does love his INEOS Grenadier. I'm not trying to make this the longest video in the world, so let's get into my concluding thoughts on this and wrap this up. Okay, so I'm never going to say that I will not own the INEOS, because I do think that it is a super cool platform, but at this point I think I'm more inclined to own the pickup truck version, assuming that even comes to the United States. I need a few more years to watch these things really play out and make sure this doesn't just belong to the billionaires that live in Aspen, and this is actually going to end up being a vehicle that isn't a G-Wagon. This is actually going to keep being the off-road focused vehicle and not turn into a luxury wagon, because I do feel like there's a very good possibility that that could happen, because those people are willing to pay more for these vehicles. And at the end of the day, it may end up in the future getting catered more and more to those people, because again, this is owned by a billionaire. I don't know the guy. I know he's an overlander and he's been all around the world, but it's also running a business. So we'll see what happens. I would personally be more inclined to own the pickup truck version, the Quartermaster, but I do have questions about if that, I know it's been announced that that's coming to the United States, or I believe it has been announced. I really haven't followed this stuff that closely, but the problem with the Quartermaster is it's a pickup truck and it is being built in another country. So I would assume that that is within the chicken tax territory, and it's the same reason you don't see very many 79 series Land Cruisers that are imported into the United States, or the pickup truck versions of the 70 series Land Cruisers imported into the United States. And that's because there's a 25% tax typically when bringing things in. Toyota gets around it, of course, bringing stuff in from Mexico. I don't know the ins and outs of how that works and why there's not a 25% tax there. But anyway, I would assume that coming all the way from Europe, that there's going to be a heavy tax for bringing in the Quartermaster. So if you know anything about that, please comment below, because I might be speaking out of school here. But I know the Quartermaster is coming soon, but even if it launched next week, it still isn't enough time for me to be confident in that vehicle, because I'm going to be putting so much money into my next build. It's scary for me. And a lot of people are in the same boat. You know, you buy a new truck, you're going to put all this money into it. You want to trust it. You want to have confidence in it. And so with the INEOS, again, we're not just talking about a first generation truck. Everybody is saying about the Tacoma, avoid this thing at all costs. It's a first generation truck. The difference with the Toyota is that there's a dealership in every city. As with the INEOS, you don't have that. The INEOS isn't just the first generation year of a model. It's the first generation model year plus the first generation of a vehicle being built by a factory that they bought like 2 or 3 years ago to manufacture these. And, you know, I have no doubt they're building quality stuff, and I'm not saying they're building half-assed vehicles or anything like that. I'm just saying that there's surely going to be some hiccups there. Toyota has been building stuff forever. Ford, Nissan, all these guys have been building stuff forever. INEOS is very new to this. Even though they have factory-trained employees and all this stuff, it's still going to be new. And with time, we should see some issues. And maybe they're amazing and we'll never see any issues with any of them. I don't know. But for me, it's just too big of a risk, too big of a gamble. But I do hope that these things prove to be very reliable, because like I said, I'm never going to rule out the Quartermaster, because they have the Quartermaster and they just announced the new version that is the utilitarian version. It doesn't even come with a bed. I think it's amazing to see that kind of stuff, that you can buy the Quartermaster without a bed, because honestly, I wish I could buy my new Tacoma without a bed. but it's not available. The big question with the INEOS Quartermaster and the version that doesn't come with a bed, is that actually going to come to the United States? And if it does, I mean, that is just so cool that they're going to have a platform set up to not only can you build this thing out, but you don't even have to worry about taking the bed off and finding something to do with it, because it is a waste of materials. And they, again, are supporting the aftermarket with that. I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from. So I appreciate very much that INEOS is building vehicles, honestly, for me, for the type of person that I am and the way I like to modify things. But it's just outside of my pay scale right now. And it's also outside of my risk versus reward scale right now. So anyway, some of you guys had asked why I was not buying the INEOS Grenadier, and those are my reasons. I know some of them are flawed, some of them don't make sense, and some of them are very personal opinions to just me. So, you know, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I'm going to be spending a ton of money on my new Tacoma. It's a hybrid, which is also risky, and it's a first year, which is also risky. But the difference is, if there's a problem, I can take it down to a dealership and Toyota will fix it. It's just one of those things. Maybe they'll deny some of it because I've modded it too much or something like that, but at least there's mechanics that know how to fix this stuff, that kind of a thing. And there's dealer training and there's all that goes along with it. So it makes me feel a little bit better because I'm going to be putting a ton of money into this thing, and I'm going to be driving this thing for who knows, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's another 15 years like my FJ. I never in a million years thought I was going to be driving that thing that long. I used to buy cars all the time. It's just been incredible, and I want another vehicle like that. For you guys that have not been diving into this as deep as I have, I thought this would be useful information for you. So I thought I would share it, and those are my reasons for not buying the INEOS Grenadier. Anyways, that's all I have for you right now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time.
As always, thank you so much for watching, and feel free to check out my other adventure, off-road, and overland related content.